I am going to talk straight through. No music bed, no promos, no sponsor breaks. Just me and whoever is still on the other end of this. I am Sam Hart, British passport, Taipei resident card, reporter for a small international outlet that pays late and expects me to sleep near an airport. I live in Don District, 2 blocks off Yongkang Street, in a 5th-floor walk-up that smells like fried scallion pancakes at noon and scooter breaks at night. I am recording from our office near Xinyi Anhe Station because it has a window that faces east and a solid table that does not wobble when the subway passes. I'm going to keep this going as long as the power holds, and when it does not, I have a battery pack and a plan for candles. I promise no drama for the sake of drama. Only what I see, what I hear, and what people tell me with their own names. If I miss something, it is because the ground moved under me. When the first rumors of a full cordon started, it felt like the start of a typhoon. The air had that waiting quality. Stores took deliveries early, lines formed at Family Mart, and 7-Eleven for cup noodles and bottled water, calm lines, heads down, cash folded in hands. The chatter on my group threads was the same stuff we have seen 100 times. Fishing fleet swarms, slow-moving Coast Guard cutters from the mainland drifting over the median line, drones with long loiter times stalking the offshore wind farms, fake text messages about evacuation orders that did not exist. The difference this time was silence from people who never go quiet. The defense reporter at the United Daily News stopped answering after lunch. A contact at the Ministry of Transportation who always replies with a scolding emoji sent a single line. Watch Taoyuan departures after 1600. It was 1320 then, normal spoken time, not letters. I wrote it down in my notebook in neat block letters and circled it twice. By 1430, I was on the roof of our office, looking across to Taipei 101. The tower looked like it always does, a green glass stack with aircraft warnings on top, and the tuned mass damper hidden inside that sways during earthquakes. The sidewalks were full. People bought tea. Someone argued about a parking ticket on Keelung Road. I am not going to paint a picture that suggests panic where there was none. Taipei does not spook easily. Not after earthquakes, not after typhoons, not after the military flights that started buzzing the strait years ago. I checked air traffic on my laptop. There were 3 long hauls scheduled to leave Taoyuan for Europe and the United States, 1 to Frankfurt, 1 to Los Angeles, 1 to Vancouver. Every one of those flights pushed back boarding by 30 minutes, then by another 30. The airport camera feeds that the tourism board keeps on YouTube stuttered, then froze on a frame of an empty gate with a man in a reflective vest, mid-step. At 15:10, the first real change hit. Across the east side of the city, cell coverage started blinking in and out. Not off, just odd. Maps would load the streets, but not the satellite layer. Messages sent, but did not deliver. Calls rang once and died. It was the same on every carrier, which told me either a switch problem or a deliberate push. Then my laptop threw me off the office Wi-Fi and refused to reconnect. The router lights were on. The fiber modem was on. The connection from our provider showed healthy on the app. No packets moved. I walked down the stairs and stuck my head into the coffee place on the ground floor. The owner, Mr. Luo, kept steaming milk like nothing had changed. I asked if the Wi-Fi was still up. He said the password out loud but shrugged. "Customers cannot get the football scores," he said and smiled like it was a joke. And then he looked at his own phone and the smile dropped. At 1600 in letter form, the sound of the city shifted. Traffic light cycles went slow, then fast. Bus stop boards went blank. The Tai Power building across the river showed a steady white glow on every floor, like a ship at night, while blocks around it dimmed and brightened in waves. There was a helicopter over the city, not military. The news chopper from CTS with the side door open and a cameraman strapped in. It drifted towards Songshan Airport, circled once, and pulled away toward the Keelung River, low and fast. No chatter on my scanner, because I'd already shut that down based on the request to keep this clean of channel talk. I could smell ozone near the aircon duct and thought about the surge protectors in the office. I started moving batteries and notebooks to the floor and killing anything that was not needed. I'm going to put names here so none of this reads like a thriller. At 16:30, I called Miss Lin, who runs a small breakfast shop on Lishui Street. She keeps a radio on a shelf above the fridge for baseball and ballads. She answered on the second ring, which means her line still had signal. She said her niece at Hsinchu Science Park had been told to stay home from the night shift. She said 2 men in blue jackets with laminated badges had come by her building and asked if any residents were foreign media. She said she told them no. She asked if she should tape her windows. I told her not to bother because we were not talking about pressure breaks from a cyclone. We were talking about glass shatter from overpressure if something slammed hard. I told her to move her bed away from the window and take a screenshot of her home registration card. She laughed and told me I sounded like her brother. Then she got quiet and asked me if it was going to be all right. I said the thing every reporter says when there is nothing to offer but a voice. I said I would call back. At 17:10, the government press room sent out a statement across what was left of the official channels. It was short and direct, a declaration that ships from the other side had entered designated zones around the island in numbers beyond normal. A warning that military exercises had shifted from training to coercion. A request that people avoid the coastal areas in Keelung, Tamsui, Suao, Hualien, Taichung, and Kaohsiung, and stay clear of the docks. The wording was careful. It did not say invasion. It did not say war. It said blockade. It said a closure of sea space without legal basis. It used the phrase unlawful interference. It named nothing by name. It was the tone of a city that has had to say this too many times. By 1800 letter time, sunset bent the light hard across the expressway, and Taipei 101's beacons looked bright even with the sky still pale. Then the sound started, a distant rolling thunder that was not weather. It came in clusters, a pattern I could count. 3 in a row, a pause, then 5. I have heard artillery. I have heard supersonic air passes. This was neither. This was the kind of long-reach strike that rides a ballistic arc or a cruise line. My phone was full of useless notifications about deliveries I did not care about, and silent where it counted. But I had eyes. I moved to the window and watched the northeast horizon over Keelung. There were faint trails that caught the last light. I could not see any impact flashes from here. A second later, there were 2 thumps that rolled through the glass. The desk shook. I put my hand on the recorder so it would not crawl across the table. A minute later, the official emergency system pushed tone bursts through every phone that still had a heartbeat. No words, just a triplet of tones, a pause, then the same pattern on repeat. I do not know if you have ever heard a city of 2 million receive a tone at the same time. It stops breathing for a second. The lights did that thing where they dip, then come back, then dip again. Then the east side of the city fell dark block by block, like a curtain pulled by an unseen hand. The hospital signs stayed on. The hotels near Xinyi kept some windows lit, probably on generators. The metro kept running, which told me the traction power was on a separate protected circuit, or the backups had kicked. I looked down at Rene Road and saw scooters moving in slow files with their hazard lights blinking, a line of orange dots making a careful turn at every intersection. I am going to log what I knew, what I guessed, and what I later confirmed. The first salvo hit air bases and radar sites, Hualien and Taitung on the east coast, Tainan and Pingtung in the southwest, Qiashan and Shanying mountain shelters. Some missiles were decoys. Some were for real, some were anti-runway, some were for power transformer yards. I heard from a colleague who had a friend at the control center for Taipower that they saw a wave of faults within seconds of each other, the kind of pattern you get when a grid gets hit at multiple nodes to force a collapse. You can bring it back if you isolate fast, but it takes time and it takes stable control links, and those were not stable anymore. A lot of the guidance packages used for these strikes ride on positioning signals from satellites. Jamming those signals does not make the missiles miss by miles, but it increases the circular error, and that means more shots to guarantee a hole in a runway. The point of a blockade is not to flatten a city. The point is to keep planes on the ground and ships in port, and communications muddy enough that every decision takes twice as long. After the first hour of strikes, the air was full of smaller sounds. Fast jets high overhead that I could not see because of the haze. The buzz of quadcopters in the alley behind the building. Hobby drones grounded by law. But flying anyway. Because people will risk a fine to see their own street. A crackle from somewhere to the west that sounded like a transformer cooking off. Then a deep, steady hum that I recognized from covering exercises in the south. Airborne early warning aircraft from the other side, holding their plates just outside the old unofficial lines and scanning everything. No calling codes here, just shapes and habits. At 19:20, I got a text through from a U.S. Navy public affairs officer who has never once texted me first. The message was 5 words. East of you, hold your breath. I wrote it down because phones were not trustworthy anymore. If I say a thing happened, I want to be able to show the ink. 2 minutes later, over the ocean to the east, I saw faint pricks of light lined up in pairs, then in 4s, moving south to north on a line that would be east of Hualien and northward along the island's shelf. Those were not commercial ships. Commercial ships were already going dark, transponders off, hulls pointed away. I counted 8, then lost the rest in haze. Arleigh Burke hulls carry a lot of vertical cells. You do not bring that many east of Taiwan unless someone told you to. You also do not keep them there if someone starts feeding them anti-ship shots from the mainland coast. I watched for contrails of ballistic shots, but the night did not give me that. What I did get was the sudden absence of those pricks of light. One by one, they winked out on whatever optical gear the rooftop watchers were using and vanished from the open source feeds that still limped along. The rumor later was that the surface groups broke into smaller dispersal patterns and ran radar silent with passive receivers only, like a group crossing an open field and crouching low. I could not confirm that then. I can say that the east looked empty within 10 minutes. At 1940, Mr. Huang, a cab driver I know who works nights around the Shinyi shopping streets, knocked on our office door. He had a spare car battery on a dolly and a grin that was more stress than humor. He said, "You asked me last year what I would do if this day came. I said I would go to my sister's in the mountains. I am here instead. My sister is stuck at work at National Taiwan University Hospital, so I brought you this." He wheeled the battery in and set it by the table. He told me he had spent the last hour driving a group of students from Gongguan to Nangang because the metro lines were packed and some stations had closed the gates to control the flow. He said the kids kept their masks on and shared a single phone to track a map that barely loaded. He said the city was careful, not scared. He asked if I had water. I gave him 2 bottles and my last sleeve of crackers and told him to go home. He said he would try, then he stood very still and listened, and we both heard a high, thin whine to the south. That sound grew, and then there was a flash in the far distance. Not an explosion near us, a smudge on the horizon like a camera flash in a foggy room. A half-second later, a thud that hit the chest more than the ear. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 pulses in a line. I wrote a set of marks in my notebook. If a power substation in the south took hits, there would be rolling black down the spine of the island. If the fuel tanks at a base went, there would be a specific kind of smoke in the morning. For now, it was just a sound, written down, time-stamped. I want to be clear about the internet dying because it did not fall off a cliff. It sagged, then tore. Domestic sites hung on longer. Anything that had to reach overseas went through a straw. Undersea cable maps look like spaghetti until you realize how few landings matter for a single island. Cut 2 or 3 and you have not cut the nation. But you have forced everything through a bottleneck. And if you are also smashing switching centers or spoofing routing announcements, the effect feels like a blackout. Messages that left my phone arrived an hour later across town. Emails sat in outboxes like snow. Video calls were pointless. Streaming was dead. The platforms that shape a lot of our lives suddenly meant nothing. And the only traffic that mattered was literal traffic. Scooters, police vans, ambulances with steady 2-tone sirens. Volunteer trucks with bottled water pulled from warehouses near Banqiao. At 2020, I walked down to the street to see how people were behaving. Taipei does not shout during emergencies. It concentrates. There were queues at ATMs and convenience stores, neat queues, 1 cart per person, no shoving, cash ready. Store managers were limiting purchases to prevent hoarding. A clerk at the drugstore near Xinsheng South Road was handing out number slips for packs of batteries and writing the time on each slip to keep resale in check. A group of students in National Taiwan University jackets were zip-tying cheap flashlights to traffic cones to mark a dark intersection where the signals had failed. A parks worker in a green vest was unlocking a small gate to let people fill containers from a water spigot because some apartment towers had lost pump pressure. I asked him his name. He said Tsai. He said he used to be an army sapper and he could lay a line down a block and hook a generator to a pump if someone had cable and a transfer switch. He did not say anything about politics. He did not talk about invaders. He just wanted the taps to run so the old apartments would not turn into heat boxes by morning. I am going to read you a testimony. I recorded it at 2050 in a shop doorway because the owner did not want to be inside with the griddle hot and no vent running. Her name is Wu Mei. She runs a small scallion pancake stand on Yongkang Street. She is 50 maybe. She is cheerful with customers and blunt with landlords. This is what she said with a little cleanup for the ums and false starts. My husband is in Keelung. He loads containers at the port. He called at 5 and said he was staying at work because the foreman told them to chain the yard gates and pull the trucks inside. He said there were ships outside the breakwater that nobody knew. He said the offshore lights looked wrong. He told me to pack the cash. I told him we have a safe with only receipts and old coins. He told me to close the shop early. I said I had customers. I always have customers. He told me to look at the sky. I did not know what he meant. I looked up and there were trails. After that, the phones turned stupid. He called again and said the foreman sent them home. He said he would try to drive, but the road was thick. He told me to take the scooter and go to my sister. I am not going to my sister. I am going to fry my last dough and split it between the neighbors. Then I will go upstairs to my mother. She cannot walk down fast. I have a candle. I have 2 jugs of water. I will turn off the gas. I will wait. At 2200 letter time, another cluster of strikes passed overhead, higher this time, running south to north. The after sound rolled over the city 30 seconds later. I counted 6, wrote 6. The television in the lobby of our building showed a studio anchor with a battery lamp on the desk. The map behind her showed red circles offshore and gray boxes drawn around ports and strait passages. She had a spit of hair out of place, and you could tell she had been crying. She kept it together. She read a list of emergency centers and blood donation halls. She read a phone number and told people not to call it unless there was smoke or flame or someone trapped. I respect that. She did not sell fear. She sold working instructions. I tried to call my mother in London, even though that was foolish. International lines were a bad fantasy now. I left a voice note that would probably ride fiber to nowhere and sit there all night. I told her I was in the office, not at my apartment, because the office had fewer windows, concrete on 3 sides, and a fire escape that did not lock from the inside. I told her I had food for 2 days and water for 3. I told her the city was composed and that I was writing everything down. I did not tell her that I had taped a note on my shirt with my name and blood type, and a local number to call if someone found me. That felt melodramatic, but I did it anyway. If you think that sounds theatrical, you have not dug through a hard drive of casualty lists and wondered why a simple thing like a name on paper is so rare. Near midnight, a group of young men with helmets and vests started placing sandbags at the corners of Zhongxiao East Road, not to build a fort, just to steer cars around a collapsed traffic light. One of them had a vest that said Civil Defense in Chinese. He told me he had been on a call list for 2 years and had trained on weekends to direct traffic, carry stretchers, and stop bleeding. He said his name was Chen. He said he had a day job in a logistics warehouse in Banqiao and a second job on a delivery scooter. He said he had told his boss he would not make the night shift, and his boss had told him to stay safe and bring back coffee if any coffee shops were still open in the morning. He laughed once and then focused on the flow. He waved a bus through and pointed a scooter to the side street and thanked the pedestrian for waiting. This is what order looks like when institutions get punched. It looks like a kid in a vest telling a bus to slow down. I am not going to speculate on what foreign militaries were doing beyond the line of land I could see. I will say that the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force announced a live track line east of the island earlier in the day and then dropped that feed. I will say that the Philippine government put out a notice about closed zones near the Bashi Channel and that boats near Luzon started hugging the coast. I will say that I heard, from someone who has no reason to lie, that the big long-range radar in Hsinchu County, the one on Lashan that looks like a white box up on the mountain, went from a healthy hum to a dead quiet at 21:15 and was back to a low baseline at 22:40. That could mean nothing. It could mean a switchover to a quieter mode. It could mean the generators kicked in and then stabilized. If I cannot confirm, I will not invent. Sometime after 1 in the morning, I do not have the exact time because the wall clock died and my watch needed a nudge, I heard a single siren that did not move. National Taiwan University Hospital is not far as the crow flies. I cannot use that phrase. It is not far along the road that is cleaner. The siren did not move because the ambulance had already arrived and stopped. Sirens that do not move are worse than those that pass. They mark a point that matters, and they make the night feel like a room with a single light bulb. I went to the window and saw a small group of people on the corner, hands in pockets, facing the hospital tower like it had answers. A man in a white coat crossed the street with a box of something and paused to let a scooter roll past. He looked tired, but he looked in control. I'm going to say his name because I asked. Dr. Wu, emergency medicine. He said the hospital was on generator power and had enough diesel for 2 days if the deliveries kept coming. He said dialysis machines were running. He said they were triaging at the door and sending home anyone who did not need a bed that minute. He said he needed to go because he had a patient in the hallway who looked worse than the chart suggested. Then he was gone. Morning brought the kind of light that makes everything look dull until the sun gets high. The east was a smear. The city had slept in pockets. Bakeries opened late. A noodle shop on Tonghua Street rolled up its gate, lit a propane burner, and started handing out broth in paper cups so people would have something warm. Prices did not change, at least on that block. People paid what the sign said and said thank you. 2 scooters idled with boxes of fresh bread tied to their racks, and the riders looked at the sky more than a person normally does. I went to a water refill station with my 2 jugs and got in line. The man in front of me wore a Taipei Water Department jacket and told me the mains were fine, but the building pumps were the choke point. He said a lot of towers had lost pressure when the power blinked. He told me to leave my bathtub full even if it looked dirty, because toilet tanks were going to matter more than showers by afternoon. He was not dramatic when he said it. He was teaching. By 10 in the morning, air traffic was gone. Songshan had nothing. Taoyuan had a single helicopter on the move along the perimeter. Army green, no markings I could see. Hsinchu's little strip was quiet. I rode a bike to the riverside park by the Rainbow Bridge to listen for jets and heard nothing but a long, slow rumble that I think was a naval group somewhere to the north, and the chatter of people trying not to look up while they walked dogs. A woman threw a tennis ball for a golden retriever and kept scanning her phone between throws, not seeing any new messages, pretending she saw some. A man in a crisp white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up, stood on the path and checked a paper list of names for an office roll call. Then put the list away and wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. He introduced himself as Mr. Yeah. He worked in accounting at a trading company on Nanjing East Road. He said the boss told everyone to stay home, but to answer if the landline rang. He said he had not used his landline in years. At 11, we got the first wave of people coming into the city from the hills with stories. A family from Wulai said the checkpoint on the road was manned by reservists in uniforms that did not quite fit and that they were polite but serious. A man from Yangmingshan said a firewatch tower had a small antenna array now and a generator humming under a tarp. He said he saw a military truck parked by the Hot Spring Hotel with 3 soldiers drinking tea out of paper cups and laughing too loud. He said the laughter sounded forced. He said he could see the ocean from where he stood, and he could count ships that were not fishing boats. He said it looked like steel pushed to the edge of a board. Close to noon, the first wave of misinformation hit like a rock slide. Messages with a false government seal telling people to evacuate Don Park. A rumor that chlorine had been released in Nehu. A voice message in perfect Mandarin saying the Red Cross had set up a camp near Taipei Arena and was distributing water, which was not true. A clip of video showing Kaohsiung Harbor empty with a caption claiming it was Keelung, which was false in both time and place. The city responded fast. The mayor's office put out short corrections with timestamps and clear language. The official emergency channel started pushing practical guidance instead of alarm. How to check your stairwell for obstructions. How to shut your gas valve. Where to find your building's water tank. I saved the good ones and read them into this feed because not everyone was getting the pushes. If I repeat something here, it is because I saw it with my own eyes or heard it from a person I trust with a name I can speak aloud. In the afternoon, I walked toward Zhongshan, past the Huashan Creative Park, which was locked, and the old brewery buildings, which were also locked. On the corner of Civic Boulevard and Jinshan Road, a team from Taipei City Hospital set up a folding table with a sign that said wound care and medication refills. People lined up with small cuts, sprained wrists, and a bag of pill bottles. A pharmacist with a ponytail and a steady voice checked labels and made notes. A woman with an insulin pump asked how long the battery in the pump would last if the power at her apartment stayed off. The pharmacist told her in exact hours and then gave her a printed sheet with places to go if she needed a recharge. A man in a dark suit with a tie loosened asked if anyone knew when the Taiwanese stock exchange would open again. No one answered. He laughed once and covered his mouth like someone had told a joke at a funeral. And he knew it was not the right time to laugh. Just past 1, another round of strikes hit something to the southeast. The noise came later, a long roll like a truck on badly laid asphalt. I did the same count. 4, pause, 3, pause, 2. I do not know what those numbers mean beyond rhythm. It helps to count so the mind has somewhere to put the shock. A dog started howling down an alley. Someone yelled at it to be quiet. The dog did not stop. 2 kids in school uniforms skated past on boards and took a corner too fast, and one of them scraped a knee and hopped up saying he was fine. He was fine. He swore a little because he is a teen. It sounded like life. At 2, a security guard at an office tower near Zhongxiao Dunhua pulled me aside and told me not to film the rooftop. I said I was not filming anything. He said he knew me from a segment I did on earthquake prep last year, the one where I asked a seismologist to explain why stairwells twist. He said his nephew had liked it. He said the rooftop had a new tenant, and that tenant was not one I should talk about. I thanked him and changed my path. If you feel like this is coy, it is not. It is survival. There are times to show everything and times to show restraint. I'm going to err on the side of not getting anyone in trouble who is trying to help. At 3, I made it to the river at Dadaocheng Wharf. The stalls were closed. The broad place where the weekend market sets up was quiet, except for a few cyclists. The water flowed toward Tamsui, brown and steady. Out past the bend, you could see the far banks of Bali and the towers on the hill. A boat moved upriver very slowly, low in the water. A barge with something covered by a gray tarp. A man on the deck held a long pole and pushed away debris. He did not wave when we made eye contact. He looked intent, like the pole was the only thing that mattered. On the railing, someone had taped a paper map of the city with circles around hospital locations and handwritten notes about which ones had generator power and which ones had posted signs asking for blankets. People wrote on the map with pencil and pen, then underlined, then added a phone number for a building manager who had a stash of drinking water on the 6th floor if you brought your own container. Around sunset on day 1, the city took a breath. You could feel it in the way people stood at crossings and waded through cycles that did not exist, looked up, then looked back at the ground, and walked anyway when it was safe. The haze from the east never fully lifted. On the hills to the north, lights came on in clusters. On the hills to the south, nothing. Taipei 101's spire was off. The big screen on the corner of the department store near the Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall was black. The Memorial Hall grounds had a handful of people sitting on the steps, each person a little distance from the next, not talking, just being outside in air that did not feel stale. A group of firefighters moved past with a coil of hose on a dolly and a bag of gear. One of them had a patch from New Taipei on the arm. He said the call was a small kitchen fire that had eaten a cabinet because someone tried to cook with a candle too close to a towel. He said it was out. He said he was more worried about people charging battery packs with cheap cords that would carry too much current and set couches on fire. He said, "Tell people to use good cords. I am telling you now, use good cords." Night 2 was quieter for strikes. The pressure shifted to the sea. That is what the people who track these things said. More ships in designated quadrants, more proof of closure. A message from a pilot in the east said, military jets were using the mountain valleys to run north and south without being seen on ordinary radar. He said he could feel the wake in the air sometimes. That little bump when something fast passes above the speed of sound too close. He said he could not show me video because he did not bring his phone on the run. He said he did not want to be the person who broke OPSEC because he wanted a clip. That is what he said. I respect that. On day 2, the shops reopened with generator hum. Another day, and the hum felt like a new sound of the city. Restaurants cooked what they had because you cannot hoard fresh noodles. Refrigerators without power become liabilities fast. My friend Arjun, who runs a curry place near Liuchengli, handed out rice and asked for donations in a cardboard box. He said he had propane for 2 days and then he would shut the door because he did not want to fight customers for supplies he could not get. He said he had sent his wife and son to stay with her parents in Taiwan because their building had a better roof tank. He said at night he heard small drones, and in the morning he found a little plastic propeller on the sidewalk. He gave it to me like a prize. I put it in my pocket and then taped it to my notebook. It is still on the cover now, next to the burn mark from a candle that tipped. We started getting more testimonies. I'm going to read one from a conscript named Chen, not the traffic volunteer. Different Chen. This one is 20 and speaks with a Hualian accent and a careful cadence because he's trying to say things right. I met him outside a small clinic in Nangang while he waited to get a bandage changed on his hand. He said he had gashed it during a scramble to move equipment when a siren went and he had not been looking where he put his fingers. My unit was on the East Coast for a training rotation. We were supposed to run a drill on refueling. The alarm went and we were told to move everything inside. We have practiced that a lot. It takes time when you have big trucks and a narrow hardstand. We did it fast. Then we were told to wait. Waiting is harder. You want to do something. Anything. The older guys told us to sit and drink water. We did. Then the lights flickered. Then someone said a bad word. Then we heard a sound like when a train comes into a tunnel. That is not a metaphor. That is what it sounds like. You asked me not to use comparisons that are not clear? The ground shook a little and dust fell from the ceiling. After that, we were told to go outside and check for damage. There was a small fire in a drum rack. We put it out with a powder extinguisher. That is when I cut my hand. I did not even notice until I saw the glove change color. I am not a hero. I am a person who can carry boxes and follow orders. I want to go home and eat my mother's soup. I know I cannot do that right now. I will do what I am told. There is a line I tell myself when I cover these things. The story is not the weapon. The story is the people reacting to the weapon. The city began organizing in a granular way. Building chat groups became building lobby meetings. A retired electrician checked the switchboards for overheat. A neighbor who used to work at a hotel managed a queue for the rooftop water fill line. A math teacher drew a schedule for charging phones and posted it by the elevator. A kid with a wireless speaker rigged it to play quiet music in the stairwell during daylight so the stairs would not feel like a mine. People taped apartment numbers on their doors in fresh ink, so responders would know what was empty and what was not. A woman taped a note that said she had gone to her sister's in Banqiao and left the key with the pharmacy on the corner. She drew a little map of the key hiding place and wrote the pharmacist's name in block letters. It mattered. I went to Keelung on the morning of the day 3 with Mr. Huang. The expressway was open but choked near the tunnels, and every so often traffic would stop dead because someone up front had slowed for a checkpoint or a fallen sign. We followed a line of trucks past a police blockade and showed our press cards twice. The officers were polite but asked real questions. Where are you going? Who are you meeting? What will you do if the air raid sirens sound? We said we would pull over and wait. At Keelung, the hills ring the harbor like seats in a stadium. The port was a frozen tableau. Gantry cranes locked with their booms up, stacks of containers like Lego. A few tugs moved slowly along the quay and then stopped. Out past the breakwater, there were shapes that did not belong to this port. Not huge carriers, not obvious gray hulls with numbers, just squat shapes that sat low and kept station. The Coast Guard had a cutter near the entrance with a high-pressure hose rigged for the show. A loudspeaker repeated a message telling onlookers to move along. No one moved along. They stood in small clumps and watched the water like it would tell them a secret. A dock worker named Lin, different from Miss Lin at the breakfast shop, agreed to talk if I did not use his face. He said the port authority had told the stevedoring companies to secure their cranes and send casual workers home. He said salaried staff were instructed to stay on in shifts, to keep essential movement possible for emergency cargo if any of it arrived. He said the Longshore Union had made a list of members with generator access for cold storage, so fish brought in by small boats would not rot on the pier if the big factories stayed dark. He said the pilots who bring ships in and out had gone to a safe location inland and were checking their charts by hand. He said the pilot boats sat at the dock with fuel, but no orders. He said he had worked on this water for 20 years and had never seen it so quiet. On the drive back, a plume of smoke rose from somewhere inland near Linku, black for a while, then brown. Mr. Huang said that looked like a substation fire at first and then maybe a chemical warehouse when it changed color. He had driven past enough wrecks to know the difference. We did not go closer. We did not need to. We had enough. We stopped at a gas station with a line that wrapped around the block. The sign on the pump said cash only. A man in a crisp uniform told the car at the front, gently, that the stations were rationing fills so every ambulance and official vehicle had priority. The driver nodded and turned off the engine to wait. No one honked. Back in Taipei that evening, the metro ran on a reduced schedule. The announcement voices were calm and slow. Kids in masks stood close to parents. Couples leaned against pillars and watched for trains. On the platform, a young man with a guitar played quietly and did not put out a case for money. He nodded at people as they passed. He stopped when the train entered and started again when it left, keeping it respectful so the station staff would not ask him to move. He sang a song in Mandarin that I did not understand fully, but the chorus was a list of stations and street names, and that felt like a spell if I believed in spells, which I do not. It was just a list, a way to keep the mind busy. By day 4, the nation's leadership gave a speech from an undisclosed location. The background was a blank wall. The audio was clean. The message was simple. The island would not be intimidated. The government had asked for assistance from partners. The coast was being monitored. The energy company was bringing circuits back in a measured way to protect the grid. People were asked to conserve. Emergency crews were asked to rest, when told. The speech did not promise a timeline. It respected the fact that time had become weird. That is not poetic. It was a statement about clocks in a city that kept stopping and starting. International friends sent me voice notes that arrived in clumps when the connection hiccuped alive. A colleague in Tokyo said newsrooms there had maps up on every wall and interns sleeping under desks. A friend in Manila said the port of Subic had a new temporary tenant with a quiet footprint and a serious face. A source in Washington said briefings use phrases like layered denial and maritime interdiction that do not mean much when you are trying to find bread. I told him bread matters more than interdiction to people on this side of the ocean. He said he knew. He said he was sorry. People ask when a blockade becomes an invasion. I am not a strategist. I can tell you what I saw. On day 5, small dots appeared on the horizon off the north coast that were not fishing buoys and not local Coast Guard boats. They kept station at a distance that felt calculated. On day 6, a wave of drones crossed from the west to the east at high altitude and split into smaller groups that loitered over the mountains. On day 7, a car near Shilin crashed into a pole and the airbags popped, and the driver climbed out shaking, and someone handed him water and told him to sit. And then the driver started to cry and say he could not reach his wife. That is an invasion, in the sense that something invaded a man's capacity to function. It is not the definition a general staff uses. It is the definition a city uses. I am going to read a list so it does not become too big in your mind. A list anchors the day. Today's list: Charge packs before noon when the neighborhood generator is scheduled to run. Boil water for drinking. Save the boiled water for the elderly first. Prop stairwell doors open with a brick so people do not get trapped if the locks fail. Do not run a generator inside a garage. Check on the man in apartment 4 because he has not answered in 2 days and he sometimes forgets to eat. If you have extra rice, leave it in the lobby with a note that says how much is folded inside. If you have extra batteries, tape them in pairs and label them with the date. If you have asthma, keep your inhaler in your pocket, not in a drawer. If you are a landlord, do not cut power to save money. If you are a boss, pay your staff even if the shop is closed. If you are a person with a voice, use it for instructions, not rumors. A thing about missiles that ride a trajectory and aim for concrete. After the first day, they become reminders. They are strategic at first, then they become punctuation. The real squeeze is the sea. Ships trying to leave, ships told to stop, ships shadowed by bigger ships, threats of boarding, pictures taken through binoculars with dates handwritten on paper next to the lens to prove the time. I know a captain of a feeder vessel that usually shuttles containers up the coast. He sent a note that said he had taken his ship into a harbor he had never used before and anchored in mud that did not grip well, and that he had tied extra lines ashore to keep from dragging in a current that seemed to want to spin him. He said he would not take cargo without a contract from someone he could trust to pay and protect him. He said those someones felt very far away. By day 8, food supply chains were showing bruises. Supermarkets limited eggs and milk to a small quantity per person. Farmers outside the city sent in produce on trucks that had to stop at checkpoints and prove cargo with handwritten bills. The big distribution centers in New Taipei ran on generators and forklifts with tired operators. A volunteer at a community pantry in Wanhua said the line formed 2 hours before they opened and stretched past the temple, quiet and orderly. She said she never expected to manage a data sheet tracking baby formula. She said she now knows the names of 12 infants in her block and their feeding schedules. She said when this ends, she will not forget those names. A man from the power company walked our street and looked up at the poles and pointed with a small stick at insulators and cross arms. He said almost nothing. He made marks in a notebook. He told me in a low voice that some of the transformers took overvoltage when the lines were cut and that they had to swap them one by one. He said parts were not infinite, but they had enough for the first round. He said the second round would depend on shipments from factories that might or might not be allowed to move. He said it like an electrician, not like a politician. It was honest and bounded. I liked him. Night 9. I dreamed in clangs and woke to the drone of something high. The sound built and then flattened. I walked to the window and saw nothing. The city in the dark is not beautiful right now. It is plain. It is a collection of edges and blank squares where windows should glow. A taxi rolled past with only its parking lights on. The driver was probably saving his headlights to crank the engine again if the battery dropped. It is not best practice, but people improvise. That is a truth that repeats in different languages. I want to speak a moment about the people who keep networks alive, not the app companies. The ones who keep signals moving at the ground level. I met a woman named Grace who works for a telecom vendor. She and her team hauled a portable generator to a cell site on the roof of an office tower 2 days ago and ran it for 6 hours to recharge the backup batteries and then shut it down to save fuel. She said she had a schedule printed on paper with grease pencil marks showing which sites would get attention and which would not. She said she hated leaving a neighborhood dark. She said she had to. She said she had a toddler at home and a mother who told her to quit if it got dangerous. She said she would not quit. She said someone has to climb the ladders. Day 10, east side, sunrise. The air smelled like diesel and rain. The forecast said scattered showers later. The metro announced a reduced headway on the brown line. A man rolled a piano out of a shuttered bar and played scales for 10 minutes and then rolled it back in. A woman with a bandage on her wrist bought a bag of vegetables and counted coins twice. A boy held a cat and told it to look at the birds. The cat did not care. The boy looked at the sky. The strike count was 2 overnight. The naval shapes were still on the horizon. I could see them better now because the air was clear. They were not fishing boats. American destroyers moved in on day one. Then they disappeared from what we could see. Some said they tucked behind the island. Some said they went farther east. Some said they never were there at all. All I can tell you is what I saw. Lights on the water in a line, then gone. People want certainty. The ocean does not give it. A sailor from Yilan who knows currents told me the eddies east of the island can hide a lot. He said a ship can sit behind a seam in the water and be there without being there. I'm repeating a thing a man said to me who smells like salt and diesel. Take it as that. By the second week, people stopped asking when it would end. They asked what to do next. The emergency drills the city runs every summer felt closer to life now. People walked to designated shelters to see if the doors were open. Some were. Some had signs saying the staff would arrive at noon. A woman with a baby strapped to her chest asked me where she could get formula without standing in a long line. I told her about the community pantry in Wanhua. I gave her the address and the hours. I wrote them on paper because the internet was slow to useless. She asked if she should leave the city. I told her I am not a person to ask that. She said fair, then she thanked me for the paper. A teacher at a cram school in Chonghe told me her students were more focused than they had ever been. She said they should not be studying for tests with this going on, but the tests were still on paper somewhere in a ministry office, and the kids wanted to believe in the future. She said one boy drew a map of the Taiwan Strait with little arrows showing ships, and then erased the arrows and drew a basketball court instead. She said he smiled while he did it, and that made her want to cry. She did not cry. She taught algebra. If you are listening to this outside the island, and you have a way to help, here are useful things. Money to organizations that already ran programs here before this started. Not new pop-ups. Medical supplies through trusted channels. Spare parts for power and communications gear with the right voltage and connectors. Clear information about shipping routes that are actually open. Truthful reporting without the lazy phrases that make war sound like a board game. If you are on the island and you have a way to help, it is smaller. Check your neighbor's doorbell. Hold a flashlight for an EMT. Translate a message for an elderly person who has a landline but not a smartphone. Tell kids the truth in words they can carry. Do not forward unverified clips because you want to be first. I want to end this segment with two short voices. The first is from Miss Lynn at the breakfast shop. I called her today at 10. Her line was clear for once. I am open, she said, not all day, only in the morning. I am making half the dough. People do not want to eat a lot. They want to stand and hold something warm and then go. I sell coffee for the same price. I keep the lights off because the power is not mine to waste. The men with the blue jackets came again. I told them I did not see any foreign media. That is not true. I saw you. But you are local now. You do not count. My husband is still in Keelung. He says the water is calm. I do not like that sentence. I am going to make more dough. The second is from Dr. Wu at the hospital. We are fine, he said. Fine is a bad word. We are functioning. We have diesel. We have blood. We have a line out the door, but it moves. I sent 2 teams home because they had been awake for 20 hours. They said no. I said yes. I am chief tonight. I say yes. If you tell your audience anything, tell them to stop using candles near curtains. Tell them to take their blood pressure pills even if they feel angry. Tell them the trauma bay is not a place for arguments. Tell them to write their names on paper and put it in a pocket. That helps us. I am going to keep this going until the battery gives up, or I do. I will keep counting what I hear because counting keeps the mind straight. I will keep saying names because names turn a city back into people. I will keep skipping the dramatic lines because we do not have time for that. The city is doing the work. The sea is tight. The sky is not friendly. The ground is solid. The noodles are hot in the morning. The doctors are tired and in charge. The kids do algebra. The lines move. That is the report. Update, late night, a short one. The horizon to the east has a faint glow that could be lightning, or could be something that makes lightning look dull. I am not going to guess. I'm going to sleep on the floor with my shoes next to my head and my bag under my hand and my phone face down to save the screen. If the tones sound, I will get low and breathe slow and wait. In the morning, I will walk to the park and read the new paper notes taped to the board by the gate. I will drink water that tastes like metal and be grateful. I will call Miss Lin and ask if she needs flour. I will ask Mr. Huang if his sister got a day off. I will stand with Dr. Wu for 5 minutes and hold a door if he asks. I will come back here and talk until the light dies. Day 11, early. Quick check. 2 strikes before dawn. 1 to the north, 1 to the east. Far. The metro says limited service again. The water truck is scheduled for noon on our street. There is a note in the lobby that says the building committee will hold a meeting at 1300 letter time to discuss generator fuel rationing and stairwell lighting. There is a small drawing of a smiling battery on the note. Someone has a sense of humor. Good. Day 11, midday. I rode to the market near Dongmen. Vendors had smaller piles of greens, but the fish stall had a surprising amount of mackerel. The seller said a boat came in at dawn, and the cold room had power long enough to keep the fish firm. I bought 2 and paid in cash and used the last of my gas to cook. A neighbor with a small child knocked and asked if I had extra. I gave him 1 fish and half my rice. He said his name is Peter, which is not the name on his mailbox, but it is the name he uses at work. He said he is a programmer. He said his company has servers overseas, and right now they are just blinking in rooms no one in Taipei can reach. He said it makes him feel useless. I told him he is not useless because he can lift a water jug and carry it up 5 flights. He laughed and said that is a low bar. I said the bar is not the point. The jug is the point. Afternoon, I walked to the Sun Yat-sen Memorial again. The pond had a thin film of dust from the air. A maintenance worker skimmed it with a net and wore a mask against the smell. A group of older men practiced Tai Chi in the shade and moved with the same sequence they always use. A line formed at a water tap. A volunteer wrote names in a notebook to track use. A kid in a baseball jersey chased a pigeon and fell on his hands and popped up and kept running. A woman argued with a man about a rumor she had heard about evacuations from Songshan, and the man held up his hands and said, "Stop, check before you talk." And she looked embarrassed and said, "Yes, yes," and they both took a step back and breathed. Evening, a text from an old contact in Kaohsiung. He said the harbor cranes were still, but the private yards were moving steel in their own way, quietly, with forklifts and extra hands. He said the ship repair guys were welding through the night because ships that do not move break faster at anchor. He said Coast Guard cutters ran on open schedule, and the patrol routes were unpredictable. He said the local night market opened for a few hours and shut early when the generators ran low. He said people ate fast and walked home together in groups. Night 11. A single long howl of wind. Real wind this time, from weather. The rain started. The city knows rain. It washed the haze into gutters and made the streets smell clean. Lights flickered once and held. A scooter slid on a crosswalk and the rider swore and got up and checked the bike for damage and rode on. A couple argued quietly under a shop awning about whether to go to her parents or his parents for the night. They chose hers. They walked away without holding hands, and then after a block they relaxed and did. The ordinary life kept pushing against the abnormal. It did not win, it did not lose. It coexisted. I am going to stop for a few hours and sleep. I will leave you with a last useful item. Tape a note on your door with the names of the people inside and any pets. Write a contact number that stays inside the building. Hospital phones are jammed. Keep a bucket near the sink for gray water. Keep a bucket near the toilet for flushing. Separate drinking water from washing water. If you have a car, do not idle it for air conditioning. Save the fuel. If you have a tank of gas for cooking, turn the valve off at the cylinder when you are done. If you have candles, put them in jars. If you have a neighbor who talks too much, let him talk for 5 minutes. Then give him a task. Task beats rumor every time. I did not sleep more than 40 minutes. A smell woke me. Not gas, plastic, and paint. I checked the window. Orange glow reflected off the glass tower down the block. I took the stairs 2 at a time, with my shoes half on, and met 2 neighbors on the landing with buckets. Fire in the alley behind the scooter shop. The owner had tried to charge 6 battery packs off a single strip, and the wiring in the storage room cooked. The door was open and smoke pushed out in a steady sheet. No flames in the alley yet. Someone had already called the fire brigade from a landline. Siren in the distance. A man shouted for an extinguisher, then another man ran back up to the third floor to grab the 2 red canisters from our hallway. I helped drag scooters away from the alley mouth. The plastic covers were tacky from heat. A woman kept yelling about her cat on the second floor of the scooter shop. A student with a shaved head and a calm voice told her to point at the window. He took a ladder from the fruit stand and went up without thinking about it. 2 minutes later, he came down with scratches on his forearms and a cat zipped in a backpack carrier, eyes wild. The woman cried, then realized the cat was fine and stopped crying and held the bag to her chest and kept breathing. The fire truck turned into the lane without slowing. The crew moved like a drill. One pulled a line and charged it from the hydrant 3 doors down. One took a hook and tested the door frame. One kept the civilians back with a flat hand. A young firefighter in a wet coat asked who had keys to the shop. The owner appeared with a ring of them and shaking hands. The firefighter took 2, picked correctly on the second try, cracked the door wide, and the nozzle operator hit the fire from a crouch. The smoke rolled up the alley and dispersed. 10 minutes of work and the main heat was out. An officer told the owner to shut the building's main breaker, get a licensed electrician, and not touch anything until inspection. The officer then looked at the rest of us and said, "No more power strips daisy-chained. Not this week." Everyone nodded like kids. Back upstairs, I reset my bag. Passport, recorder, notebooks, batteries, 2 charging bricks, 1 headlamp, 2 masks, cash, water filter, power bar. I lay down again and could not close my eyes. I listened for the low notes from the east. Nothing big, only the city doing its night noises without electricity. I put a towel over my face and caught 20 more minutes. Morning. Gray light. A burn mark on my shirt from where I had leaned against a hot railing. No pain. I ate the last of a packet of almonds and half a banana that had gone soft. In the lobby, someone had taped a schedule for generator hours. Noon to 2 in the afternoon, 6 to 8 in the evening. 2 hours for families to pump water, cook, and charge. 2 hours for the shops on the first floor to run fridges. A sign-up sheet for the elevator for people who could not do stairs. A building committee member named Mrs. Quo tapped the paper with a pen and said, "We will start on time, no exceptions." That tone keeps buildings alive. I called Miss Lin. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was clipped. "My husband did not come home," she said. "I think he is in Keelung still. There is no answer this morning. I went to the roof to try to get signal. Nothing. I'm going to open the shop anyway. I have dough. If I stay upstairs, I will think." "I will try to get a message through at the port," I said. "I know a stevedore named Lin, too. I will ask him to put your husband's name on the wall by the guard shack. It helped during the typhoon 2 summers ago." "Do that," she said, and ended the call. At the market near Dongmen, the fish vendor told me to buy early or skip it. He said transport from the coast was too slow to guarantee freshness by afternoon. I bought tofu and greens and a bag of rice. A man next to me asked the price of eggs and then put the carton back. The vendor said, "Take 4, and split a carton with a knife and handed him half. Small acts have weight. No slogans. Just arithmetic that keeps people level. At 10 in the morning, the city pushed out a bulletin through the emergency app and threw paper notices at district offices. Water trucks would stop at designated points with fixed times. Each household could fill 2 containers up to 20 liters each. Bring your own containers, no exceptions. A map with circles showed the stops. The nearest to me was on Jinshan South Road. I put tape labels on my 2 jugs with my name and number and walked over. The queue was long but quiet. A volunteer with a clipboard took names and marked container counts with a pencil. A police officer stood at the head of the line and had a simple script. 2 containers per household. Keep the cap clean. Keep the inside clean. If your building has power for pumps this afternoon, let someone older take your slot. People listened. A teenage girl with dyed hair held the place for 3 apartments and got shade from a stranger's umbrella. I saw 2 men try to cut. The officer put a hand on the shoulder of the first man and tilted his head toward the back. The man went. The second man looked at the ground, turned around, and took his place with no words. The truck arrived on time. A city worker attached a hose to a stand and flowed water into jugs with the skill of someone who had managed lines at a festival. The water ran clear. Midday, Dr. Wu texted me. One line. If you have a platform, tell people not to run generators inside. He added, we had 4 patients overnight with carbon monoxide poisoning. 1 died. Family did not notice until they fainted, too. I read the message twice to be sure. Then I read it into this recording. Then I put it on a paper note and taped it on our building's door. No generators inside, no grills inside, no cars idling in garages. Carbon monoxide kills without smell. I added a skull symbol, not art, a label. At early afternoon, the generator hours started. Our lights flickered on. The stairwell bulbs lit. A cheer went up floor to floor. People hustled to plug in chargers and pump water to rooftop tanks. The building across the alley tried to draw too much at once and tripped their breaker. A man in a tank top ran to the lobby box and reset it twice. It tripped twice. He caught my eye and shrugged. I shrugged back. He took half his cords out of the strip and tried again. It held. Electricity is teamwork when the grid is fragile. While the power ran, I called a friend in Nehu who works at a cold storage facility. He said a compressor blew when the power surged and the refrigerant line leaked. He said the crew evacuated and called the fire brigade for a hazardous materials response because there was an ammonia smell. He said the responders arrived in full suits, checked readings with meters, and told nearby warehouses to shelter in place for 1 hour. He said everyone did exactly that. He said no one walked toward the smell. He told me to repeat that. If you smell something sharp near a cold storage plant, do not investigate. Move away and close doors. Wait for the professionals with meters to say go or stay. Curiosity hurts lungs. Near 4 in the afternoon, a series of thumps rolled in from the southeast. I counted again. 3, 2, pause, 4. 20 seconds later, the power dipped and recovered. The television in the lobby flickered with a crawl that said a power substation outside of Ruifang had tripped from grid instability and was being isolated. No mention of a hit. The smoke on the far hills looked dark, then gray, then gone. Maybe a brush fire from debris, maybe not. No invented detail here. Just what we could see. I rode to Wanhua to check the community pantry. The line reached the corner and bent left. A woman with a baseball cap and a vest labeled volunteer walked the line and took numbers and asked what people needed. Not what they wanted, what they needed. Formula, insulin syringes, rice, any protein, soap. The pantry had a whiteboard with quantities and times. Formula at 4, rice at 5, soap tomorrow morning. Insulin syringes with a doctor note only. The volunteer saw me reading and said, please, if you report, do not show faces. People do not want to be online, we asked. I said I would not. I asked her name. She said Hannah. She said her husband was in the reserves in New Taipei and she had not heard from him in a day. She said she was fine. She was not fine. She had a job and she was doing it. On the ride back, I saw 2 men pry open a pharmacy shutter with a crowbar in a side lane near Longshan Temple. They looked around with jittery heads and went inside. Before I could even think about what to do, 2 neighborhood watch volunteers in blue armbands walked up, stood in the doorway, and spoke in low voices. The men inside handed over 2 boxes and came out with their hands up. The volunteers took a picture of their faces, took their names, and told them to leave. No fight, no heroics. The volunteers then called the shop owner and waited until he arrived. He looked tired and sad and said, if you need medicine, ask me. Do not break my door. Then he repaired his shutter with wire and a pair of pliers and sat on a stool to watch the street. Evening. Rain started again. Not heavy. Enough to soften the edges of sound. At 6, generator hours returned, and our building committee held a meeting in the lobby. 15 people. One agenda, fuel. A man who owns a small workshop in Xinzhuang said he knew a temple that kept diesel for their generator and drums because they host festivals and do not trust the grid during typhoons. He said he could ask for a loan of 2 drums if we offered to return the fuel or replace it later. Mrs. Kuo said we would need a truck and straps. Mr. Huang said he could drive. I said I would go to carry. The committee voted with hands. 12 for, 3 against. The 3 against said the fuel run was risky. They were right. The 12 said the stairwell needed lights and the pump needed electricity for the old folks and for families with babies. They were also right. We went. We left at 7. Mr. Huang drove his cab. I sat in the front with a map and a flashlight. 2 neighbors named Peter and Mr. Tsai sat in the back with gloves and 2 ratchet straps. The cab hummed on low beams to save the alternator. We took Rene Road west, then cut to the expressway. The checkpoints were active but light. A police officer with a reflective belt waved us through after we showed building committee papers and said generator fuel in Chinese. He nodded. He did not waste words. A little farther, a group of reservists inspected a truck with a tarp. They were polite and thorough. Their vests said military police. Their rifles were slung. They looked like dads on a serious weekend. I write that because it is true. At the temple in Xinchuang, the caretaker met us with a flashlight and a ledger. He said the drums were for emergencies. We said this was an emergency. He nodded, wrote our building name and address in the ledger, had a sign, and watched us load 2 blue drums into the cab's trunk and back seat. We padded them with blankets, tightened the straps, and put a towel under one bung because it had a slow weep. Diesel, not gasoline. Lower volatility but not zero risk. We drove slow all the way back while Mr. Huang talked to the drums like they were kids in a car seat. At our building, we rolled the drums in on a dolly and parked them next to the generator cage. An electrician named Mr. Ye checked the fuel line and filter, bled air from the system, and fired the generator. It coughed, then caught. The lights in the stairwell glowed. People cheered from their landings. We gave the electrician a bottle of water and a chair. He shook his head and kept listening to the engine, with his eyes closed like it was a song. He said he would sit with it for an hour to make sure the load stayed even. We left him alone. Night crept into the quiet. I sat on the floor of my office and recorded notes. A call came through from Kaohsiung. The contact said a container yard had a stack collapse during a small quake. Not a big earthquake, a bump, enough to shift a poorly braced stack. 1 man broke a leg, 2 had cuts. The yard supervisor shut the whole block and posted a guard at the gate to keep casuals from slipping in to look for scrap. He sent his crew home. He said the cranes would restart in the morning if the power allowed. He said he did not want more people hurt because someone could not wait to move a box. Around midnight, a fisherman from Tamsui called me on a number that only a handful of people use. He said he had run his boat just out past the river mouth at dusk to drop 2 nets and then hug the coast in the dark to check lines. He said he heard a deep sound under the water like a distant drum. He said he could feel it through the hull. He said he turned back. He said he had felt it before, years ago, when a foreign submarine ran deep near the channel. He said he did not want to be out there if machines were moving under him. He said the catch would wait. I tried to sleep. 30 minutes. The tones woke me. 3 pulses on the phone and a text that read shelter. Ongoing strikes, east and south. The air changed. You could feel the pressure shift. A run of detonations rolled and kept rolling. Not close. Far enough to count and not duck. I did not pretend to be brave. I lay on the floor and counted and breathed slow. When the noise froze, I got up, drank water, and wrote the times down with a dull pencil because my sharper one had snapped. Morning, I checked on Miss Lin. No answer. I walked to her shop. The shutter was up. The griddle was off. There was a note on the counter. Went to Keelung to look for Chen. Back later. I folded the note back where it was. I found Mr. Huang and asked if he would drive me to Keelung. He said yes before I finished the sentence. The expressway east had light traffic. The tunnels were damp. We passed 2 army trucks with canvas covers and soldiers sitting straight on benches, boots aligned. Their faces were steady. Near the Keelung exit, a line of private cars waited for a checkpoint. The police officer waved us to a side lane when Mr. Huang held up his taxi placard and pointed at a press badge on my chest. At the port, the main gate was closed to civilians. We parked a block away and walked. The Union Hall had a board outside with names and notes. I scanned for Chen, Then for Miss Lin's husband's full name, which I knew from a bag I once signed for during a typhoon. Nothing. A foreman came out with a hard hat and a clipboard. I introduced myself. He knew the breakfast shop. He said he had seen Miss Lin 10 minutes earlier. He said he told her to wait while he checked the west yard. He said she was stubborn and would go looking anyway. He grinned. Then his grin faded. He said the west yard had taken a hit to a transformer 3 nights ago, and they were working from a single feed and a generator and moving only what they had to. He said the cranes were parked and locked. He said the workers were on call in a rotation. He said the men did not like to go home because they did not like to leave the yard alone. We found Miss Lin by the fence at the west yard. She had a small backpack and a face like someone who has looked at too many strangers and hoped each would be the one. She saw me and exhaled. She said, "He is not here." I asked if she had checked the clinics and the first aid station. She nodded. We walked together to the guard shack on the south gate. The guard took down her husband's name and wrote it on a sheet headed Family Inquiries. He promised to call if a crew list matched. He did not make a false promise. He did not say when. He only said he would call. We sat on a concrete step and ate 2 buns from a bakery that had somehow kept baking. Mr. Huang stood a few feet away to give us space. A tugboat moved slowly in the channel with 2 crewmen on deck and a coil of rope that looked too new. Farther out, a squat ship sat still. A gull landed on the railing near us and cocked its head. Miss Lin laughed once at the gull, and then stopped. She pulled out her phone and swiped without seeing anything. She put the phone away. She said she would wait another hour, then go home. She asked me if I would tell people to tape names on their doors again. I said yes. She nodded. We drove her back to Taipei. She went upstairs without a word. That afternoon, the city issued a boil water advisory for 3 districts after reports of low chlorine levels in a section of the network. The advisory said to boil for 3 minutes and let cool before drinking. It said the problem was isolated and under investigation. It said the plants were functioning, but distribution had stirred sediment. People boiled. A neighbor texted me to ask if a countertop filter was enough. I said boil first, filter second if he wanted taste improved. He boiled. At dusk, a convoy of flatbeds rolled down Keelung Road with portable tower lights and fuel drums. The trucks turned toward a hospital loading dock. A volunteer waved traffic around with a handheld light and kept his feet planted while scooters flowed like water. The hospital had posted a sign asking for blankets and batteries. A man who owns a camping shop opened the back of his van and handed over sleeping pads and thermoses. He told me his name was Kevin. He said he had closed his shop 2 days ago and was driving inventory to places that needed it. He said he could not pay rent like this, but the landlord had called and said to forget rent for now and to keep his receipts for insurance. He said he did not expect that call. He said it made him cry in the stockroom. Night, another message from Dr. Wu. We have a kid with asthma whose mother's nebulizer battery died. If you have any way to get a battery here soon, do it. I called the building committee. Mr. Tsai said he knew a man who rented power tools and batteries near Zhongxiao Xinsheng. 10 minutes later, Peter and I were on Mr. Huang's cab again, moving through dark blocks with the engine barely above idle. The tool shop owner met us at the door with a battery pack and a converter. He said to bring it back or not. He said it did not matter. He said the kid mattered. He would not take cash. He pressed the battery into my hands and pushed us back into the car. At the hospital entrance, a security guard saw the battery in my hands and waved us through without questions. We found Dr. Wu at a nurse's station. He took the pack, checked the voltage, nodded, and handed it to a nurse who disappeared into a curtain bay. He turned back and said, "Thank you. Tell your people to label everything with names and phone numbers. We need to return items when this eases." Then he was gone again. We stood in a hallway out of the way and watched a line move. It moved because the staff made it move. Walking out, I saw a board with names and bed numbers. There was a name that stuck. Chen, common name, not Miss Lin's husband's first name, different characters. My brain tried to make a match and failed. I put it away. Day breaks without ceremony now. The city wakes in segments. Our alleys sound as buckets, low voices, scooter kickstands, the wheeze of a hand pump from the second floor. I drew water, made tea, ate rice with a splash of soy sauce, and listened to the east. The strikes were lighter. The sea felt heavy anyway. The blockade line was still there. A message came from a Taiwanese journalist I trust. She said a convoy of small fishing boats had tried to make a run from Penghu to Kaohsiung with ice and fish, and had been turned back by larger ships that cut across their path and flashed lights. No boarding, no shots. Just a decision enforced with steel and angles. The fisherman returned angry and tired. She said one said he would go again tomorrow because he had to eat. She said he had a baby. She said he looked 40 but was 30. Mid-morning. The building committee posted a new note. Stairwell lighting will run 2 extra hours tonight to allow families to carry water safely. Please plan walks during those hours. Do not use candles in hallways. Someone added a smiley face with a pen. It softened the order without weakening it. At noon, I got a call from a woman named Angela in Banqiao. She runs a dialysis clinic. She said 2 patients had missed sessions because they could not get through a checkpoint with an uncooperative guard who did not recognize the clinic's letter. She asked if I knew anyone in district command who could standardize the letters for medical transit. I told her I would ask. I called the city council office I know. The aide picked up on the first ring. He said they were already working on a standardized pass template for medical runs with a QR code and a phone number. He sent me a draft. It was simple, with a space for a name, Idaho number, license plate, route, date, and a stamp. It included a line that said, "If there is doubt, call this number." I forwarded it to Angela. She said thank you, and then hung up because a patient was walking in with tired eyes, and she had work. Afternoon brought wind from the north. The air cleared for a few hours. From the top of the Elephant Mountain, you could see the city's surface damage. Not large. Broken windows. Scorch patches on rooftops. One building with a collapsed parapet. Nothing like the images people trade when they want clicks. That does not mean no pain. It means the city had armor in the places that count. The grid will take longer. The sea will take longest. I met a cable splicer named Mr. Luo near a manhole on Xinyi Road. He had a coil of fiber and a lamp, and a tool roll laid out on a cloth to keep it clean. He said someone had put a shovel through a conduit during an emergency generator install and cut 3 fibers. He said he would splice and test until the light came back. He said he had spliced through typhoons and through nights where the only light came from a lantern his apprentice held. He said this night would be easy if the traffic stayed away. He set 2 cones and started work. Evening, Miss Lin called. She said she got a call from the port guard. Her husband had been on a crew that secured a yard and then slept in an office. He lost his phone in the rush. He was fine. He was coming home on a scooter with a friend. She was making dough. She said she would cook too much on purpose. She said bring anyone who helped. She sounded like herself again. We went. Me, Mr. Huang, Peter, Mr. Tsai, and the student with the scratched arms who pulled the cat. Miss Lin fed us scallion pancakes with egg and basil and a little chili. She poured hot soy milk into paper cups. We ate standing up with our elbows tight to our sides to keep from bumping anything. Her husband arrived an hour later, hair flattened by a helmet, eyes bright. He hugged her once, hard, then let go. He thanked us, in a voice that said he was done talking for the day. He took a pancake, ate half, and fell asleep on a folding chair behind the counter with the cat in his lap. The city found a rhythm. It was not pretty, but it worked. Morning water runs, midday generator hours, afternoon lines for staples, evening quiet, night watch rotations in buildings, a whiteboard by our door with tasks. Floor 3 checks on Mrs. Chu at 9. Floor 4 takes trash to collection point at 11. Floor 5 charges power banks during 6 to 8 window for residents without outlets near the lobby. There were still shocks. A small explosion at a gas station in Sanchong when a car backed into a pump and broke a nozzle. The fire brigade put it out fast. The station closed with a chain and a sign that said, "Closed for safety." A rumor of a bridge hit that was not true. A rumor of an amphibious landing that was not true. A video of a destroyed runway that was not from this island. People learned to wait for the city's corrections. The rumor traders got bored. Not all of them. Enough. I went to a school that had opened its gym for charging stations and water. The principal handed out slips with times and reminders. No sleeping in the gym, no cooking, keep aisles clear, wear masks. An elderly couple sat in folding chairs and held hands while their phones charged. A boy did homework on a bench with a flashlight. A janitor swept in slow lines and picked up every bit of tape from the floor with patient hands. This is what catastrophe looks like when a city refuses to panic. Tasks, tape, chairs, lists, and people showing up on time. On the sea, the line held. Ships turned away. Big hulls made small moves to show intent without sparking a shot. The island's patrol craft kept to lanes. The air was a chessboard we could not see except when a roar crossed a valley or a contrail showed a curved line that ended before our eyes could track it. I have no sweeping conclusion to offer. This is not a movie. This is a map you redraw each morning with a blunt pencil and a steady hand. Decisions. My list for the next week had them stacked. Do I store more water or share the last jug with the new family on the second floor? I split it. Do I save battery for recording or use 10% to text a friend who has not answered in 2 days? I texted and then put the phone down. Do I put names in this feed or protect identities? I split that too. People with public roles get names. People who would suffer for being seen stay unnamed with roles and voices described carefully. I check with them when I can. If I cannot, I err on the side of the shade. I am going to end this extension with a hard list. People want action. Here is action. Check the stairwell door magnets. If they stick, leave them open during generator hours for airflow and close them after. Put a bucket with a lid on each landing and mark it gray water only. Keep drinking water separate. Tape the emergency numbers near the lobby phone and include a line that says, if busy, wait 2 minutes and try again. Assign a person to stand in the lobby during generator hours to keep cords from becoming a trip hazard. Use painter's tape to secure them. If you have a car with a full tank, add your name to the building list for emergency transport and set boundaries. Medical runs only. No personal errands. If you run a shop, write your hours big and keep them. People plan around you. If you handle cash for a line or a pantry, count out loud with another person and write totals on paper with date and time. If you administer medication to a neighbor, photograph the label and write down dose, time, and your name. If you have children, teach them to say their full name and address and a phone number. If you have elders, tape a medicine list to the fridge. If you have nothing else, hold a flashlight for someone who is fixing something. That is work. I will keep the recorder close and the notebook open. I will keep the stories on the ground. If something breaks, I will say it broke. If something holds, I will say it held. If there is a catastrophe, I will not sensationalize it. I will write names and details and exact times. If there is a decision to make that matters for safety, I will lay out the steps without drama. The blockade is a pressure system. The city is a counter system. Pressure meets structure. We build structure. One last update before I close this file for a while. The building across the alley just sang happy birthday to a kid on the second floor. No candles. Glow sticks on a plate, and a cupcake split 3 ways. The kid blew on nothing, then laughed, then ate. People clapped from balconies. Someone yelled, "Save the power for the lights!" And someone else yelled, "We did!" And then everyone went quiet again. The generator on our floor purred steady. The stairwell lights stayed on. The city held.